Kevin Ross never liked silence, but the night he accepted the late shift job at Iron Pulse Gym, he told himself it would be easy money. The gym stayed open 24 hours, but barely anyone showed up after midnight, and Kevin thought sitting alone at the front desk scrolling on his phone sounded like the perfect job. But what he didn't know was that some places are not meant to stay open all night, and some things should never be left alone in the dark. His shift started at 11 p.m., and the first few nights were completely normal. A couple of late lifters, the low hum of machines, the faint music playing in the background. Nothing unusual, nothing strange, but everything changed on a cold Thursday night when heavy rain poured outside, and the streets were completely empty, the kind of night where even the world feels like it's hiding. Kevin sat behind the front desk watching videos on his phone, occasionally glancing at the security monitors in front of him. And that's when he noticed something that made him pause. On camera 3, the free weight section at the back of the gym, a man was standing completely still, facing away from the camera. Kevin frowned because he was sure no one had entered. The front door had a loud bell that always rang, and he hadn't heard it once. Thinking maybe he missed it, he leaned closer to the screen. The man wasn't moving at all, not even slightly, just standing there in the dim light. Kevin stood up slowly and walked toward the back, his footsteps echoing through the empty gym, the sound of rain tapping against the windows creating an uneasy rhythm. When he reached the free weight section, he stopped and looked around, and there was no one there. The entire area was empty. Kevin felt a strange chill run through his body. He looked behind the machines, checked near the lockers, but there was nothing, no sign that anyone had been there. Confused, he walked back to the front desk and looked at the monitor again, and his heart dropped. The man was back, standing in the exact same spot, facing away from the camera. Kevin stared at the screen, his mind trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe the camera was glitching, maybe it was a recording playing on loop, but as he watched, the man's head slowly tilted to the side at an unnatural angle. As if listening to something, Kevin felt his chest tighten. He rushed back to the weight section again. Faster this time, but once again, it was completely empty. The silence felt heavier now, like something had just been there seconds ago and disappeared the moment he arrived. Kevin whispered to himself that it was just a technical issue, but deep inside he knew something was wrong. Around 2 a.m., the gym became completely silent. The background music suddenly cut off, leaving only the faint hum of electricity. Kevin tried turning it back on, but the system showed an error. Annoyed and uneasy, he leaned back in his chair, and that's when he heard it, the sound of metal clanking like weights being lifted and dropped, coming from the back. Kevin froze, staring down the hallway. The sound came again, louder this time, echoing through the empty building. He slowly stood up and grabbed a metal bar from near the desk, his hands slightly shaking as he walked toward the sound. The lights flickered above him, casting moving shadows along the walls. When he reached the corner and looked into the free weight section, he saw him, the same man, standing near the bench, press his back facing Kevin, slowly lifting a heavy barbell. The movement was too slow, too controlled, almost unnatural. Kevin felt a mix of relief and fear. He called out, asking how the man got in, but there was no response. The man just kept lifting the bar slowly. Kevin took a step closer, the sound of metal echoing in a strange, distorted way. And then suddenly, the man stopped, holding the bar mid-air, completely still. Kevin hesitated, his instincts telling him to leave, but before he could move, the man dropped the bar with a loud crash that echoed violently through the gym. Kevin flinched, and in that exact moment, the man turned around. Kevin's breath caught his throat. The man's face was wrong, horribly wrong. His skin looked pale and stretched, his eyes completely black like empty holes, and his mouth hung open in a silent, unnatural expression. Kevin stumbled backward, dropping the metal bar in his hand. The man stared at him without blinking, and then slowly stepped forward. But he wasn't walking, his feet barely moved. It looked like he was gliding across the floor. Kevin turned and ran, his heart pounding in his ears, his footsteps loud against the ground. He didn't dare look back. He ran straight to the front desk, grabbed his keys, and rushed out of the gym into the cold rain. He kept running until he reached his car, breathing heavily, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He looked back at the gym building, expecting it to be empty, but through the glass doors, he saw the man standing inside, right at the entrance, staring directly at him. Completely still, Kevin drove away as fast as he could, not stopping until he reached his apartment. He quit the job the next day without explanation, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. But a week later, he met a former employee who told him something that made his blood run cold. Years ago, a man had died in that exact spot, crushed under a barbell during a late-night workout, and ever since. Then, strange things happened in the gym after midnight. Kevin tried to forget it, tried to move on, but one night as he lay in bed, unable to sleep, he heard a familiar sound, faint but clear, coming from somewhere inside his apartment. The sound of metal clanking, slow and steady, like weights being lifted. Kevin sat up, his heart racing. The sound came again, louder this time, and then from the darkness of his room, he heard a low voice, broken and hollow, whispering his name. And just before he could react, something cold and heavy pressed down on his chest, pinning him to the bed, and in the darkness above him, he saw a shape leaning closer, a face slowly forming out of the shadows, with black, empty eyes and a silent, open mouth, as if still trapped under the weight of something that never let it go. And the last thing Kevin heard before everything went black was the sound of metal crashing down, echoing inside his room as if the gym had followed him home. Brandon Hayes had always believed that routine kept life simple. Same gym, same time, same workout, same locker, nothing ever changed. And maybe that was the reason he never expected anything strange to happen, especially not in a place he had been going for years. A normal neighborhood gym where nothing out of the ordinary had ever happened. But the night his schedule forced him to go late, everything he thought he knew about that place started to fall apart. And by the time it ended, he realized some reflections don't belong to you. And some things don't stay behind when you leave. It started when Brandon arrived at the gym around 11:30 p.m. Much later than usual, the parking lot was almost empty. Only one car parked near the far corner. The gym lights were on, but dimmer than usual, giving the place a strange, lifeless feeling, as if it wasn't fully awake. Brandon walked inside and noticed immediately how quiet it was. The usual background music was barely audible, and there were no staff at the front desk, which was unusual but not impossible at that hour. He scanned his card and entered, the faint echo of his footsteps following him as he walked toward the workout area. That's when he saw the only other person in the gym, a man standing at the far end near the cable machines, completely still, facing away. Brandon didn't think much of it at first, assuming the guy was resting between sets. So he started his own workout, trying to ignore the strange quietness. But after several minutes, he realized something that made him uncomfortable. The man hadn't moved at all, not even slightly, no shifting, no stretching, nothing, just standing there in the exact same position. Brandon kept glancing at him between sets, waiting to see any movement, but there was none. The longer he watched, the more unnatural it felt, as if the man wasn't really a person but something pretending to be one. Brandon tried to shake the feeling off and finished his workout faster than usual, deciding he would just change and leave. As he walked toward the locker room, he felt a strange sensation, like he was being watched. He turned around quickly, but the man was still there, in the same position, unmoving. Brandon entered the locker room, the door closing behind him with a hollow echo. The room was empty, completely silent. The fluorescent lights above flickered faintly, casting unstable shadows along the walls. Brandon walked to the sink and looked into the large mirror, his reflection staring back at him. Normal, tired, slightly uneasy, he splashed water on his face, trying to relax, telling himself he was overthinking. But when he looked up again, something felt wrong. Not immediately obvious, but something in the reflection didn't match what he felt. He stared for a few seconds, trying to understand, and then he saw it. Behind him, near the lockers, there was a figure standing still, tall and thin, its shape slightly distorted by the flickering light. Brandon's breath caught in his throat. He turned around instantly, but there was no one there. The room was empty. Just like before, his heart started racing. He turned back to the mirror, but the figure was gone. Brandon let out a shaky breath, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination, maybe his eyes playing tricks under the bad lighting. He grabbed his bag and turned to leave, but as he passed the mirror again, something made him look. And this time his entire body froze. In the reflection, he was standing there, but behind him, the figure was back, closer now, much closer, its head slightly tilted, its shape clear but still not fully human. Brandon slowly turned around again, his movement stiff with fear, but once again there was nothing there. The locker room was empty, silent, lifeless. Brandon's breathing became uneven, panic starting to rise. He walked faster toward the exit door, his footsteps echoing loudly. But just as he reached for the handle, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. Making him jump back, he stared at it in shock, his hand trembling as he reached for it again. But when he tried to open it, it wouldn't move. It felt like something was holding it from the other side, pushing back against him. Brandon pulled harder, his muscles straining, but the door stayed locked. And then he heard it, a slow, breathing sound. Right behind him, deep and uneven, like someone struggling to breathe. Brandon froze, every part of him telling him not to turn around. But the sound grew louder, closer, until he could feel it near his neck. He slowly turned his head, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The figure from the mirror was standing just inches away, its face now visible, pale skin stretched tightly over sharp features, eyes completely black, and a wide, unnatural smile that didn't belong to any human. Brandon screamed and threw himself against the door, pushing with all his strength, and suddenly it gave way, opening outward as if nothing had ever been blocking it. He stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. He didn't stop. He ran through the gym, past the machines, past the front desk, and out into the parking lot. He didn't look back. He drove home in silence, his hands gripping the wheel tightly, trying to process what had just happened, trying to convince himself it wasn't real, that it couldn't be real. The next day, during daylight, he returned to the gym with a friend, determined to prove it was. All in his head, everything looked normal again. The lights bright, people working out, music playing, the locker room just as it had always been. Brandon walked inside slowly, his friend behind him. Watching carefully, Brandon approached the mirror, his reflection staring back at him. Normal, unchanged. He let out a nervous laugh, feeling relief wash over him, until his friend suddenly asked what that was. Brandon frowned and looked closer, and his stomach dropped. Scratched deeply into the surface of the mirror were words that definitely weren't there before. Rough, uneven, like carved with something sharp. The words read, "You left too soon." Brandon stepped back, his heart pounding. His friend asked if he did that, but Brandon shook his head, unable to speak. And then, just for a second, he saw it again, in the mirror behind him, the same figure, standing still, smiling. Brandon spun around instantly, but the room was empty. His friend looked confused. Asking what was wrong, Brandon didn't answer. He just grabbed his things and left, deciding he would never come back again. But that night, as he stood alone in his bathroom at home, brushing his teeth, trying to calm his thoughts, he looked into his mirror, and at first everything seemed normal, his reflection staring back at him. But then slowly, almost unnoticeably, something behind him began to form in the reflection, a dark shape. Growing clearer with each second, Brandon froze, his hand stopping mid-motion, his eyes locked on the mirror, and then the figure fully appeared behind him. The same pale face, the same black eyes, the same wide, unnatural smile, standing just inches away. But when Brandon turned around, there was nothing there. The room empty, silent. And when he looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone again, replaced only by his own reflection. Except something was wrong. Something was very wrong. His reflection wasn't copying him anymore. It was still smiling, even though he wasn't. And as Brandon slowly stepped back in horror, the reflection's smile grew wider, stretching unnaturally across its face, and in a low whisper that seemed to come from inside the mirror itself, he heard the words, "Next time, don't leave." Alex Turner always believed that running helped clear his mind. It was his escape from stress, from noise, from everything. And that was exactly why he preferred going to the gym late at night when the world was quiet and empty. But what he didn't know was that some places are never truly empty, and some routines can trap you in ways you can't escape. The night everything changed started like any other. Alex arrived at his usual 24-hour gym around 1 a.m. The parking lot was almost completely empty. Only one flickering streetlight casting weak shadows across the ground. As he stepped out of his car, he felt a strange chill in the air, colder than it should have been, but he ignored it and walked inside. The gym lights were on, but dim. The usual music was barely audible, and the place felt unusually quiet. Even for that hour, as he walked toward the cardio section, he noticed something strange. One of the treadmills at the far end of the row was already running, its belt moving steadily at a moderate speed, but no one was on it. Alex slowed down, staring at it for a moment, thinking maybe someone had just stepped away, but there was no sign of anyone nearby. No water bottle, no towel, nothing. The machine was just running by itself. He shrugged it off, assuming someone forgot to turn it off, and chose a treadmill a few rows behind, starting his usual run. At first, everything felt normal. The steady rhythm of his footsteps, the faint hum of the machine, but after a few minutes, he couldn't help but glance at the empty treadmill again. It was still running at the same speed, unchanged. The longer he looked, the more uncomfortable he felt, as if the machine was waiting for something or someone. Alex tried to ignore it and focused on his run. But then suddenly, without any warning, the empty treadmill stopped, the belt coming to a complete halt, the sudden silence making Alex slow down. He stepped off his machine and looked at it, confused. And just as he was about to turn away, the treadmill started again on its own, this time much faster than before, the speed increasing rapidly, the sound of the belt growing louder. Alex felt a wave of unease wash over him. He stepped back, staring at the machine, and that's when he saw it, faint impressions appearing on the moving belt like footsteps, as if someone invisible was running on it. The footprints pressed down in rhythm, one after the other, perfectly timed. Alex's heart started pounding. He took another step back, unable to look away. The footsteps grew heavier, faster, as if whatever was running was gaining speed. The machine began to shake slightly under the pressure, and then suddenly the footsteps stopped, leaving the treadmill running empty again. Alex grabbed his towel and backed away slowly, his mind racing, trying to understand what he had just seen. But deep down he knew there was no logical explanation. He turned and quickly walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing loudly in the empty gym. But as he passed the long row of mirrors along the wall, something made him stop. Something in the reflection caught his attention. Alex looked up, and his entire body froze. In the mirror, he was not alone. Behind him, keeping perfect pace, was a figure running, its form slightly blurred but clearly there, its movements matching his exactly. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He turned around instantly, but there was no one there. The gym behind him was completely empty, the machine still and silent. He turned back to the mirror, and the figure was gone, leaving only his own reflection staring back at him. Alex didn't wait any longer. He rushed out of the gym, his heart racing, his hands shaking as he got in his car. He drove home as fast as he could, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. Maybe he was tired. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave him. Even after he reached his apartment, the silence inside felt different now, heavier, as if something had followed him. He locked the door and sat on his bed, trying to calm himself. But then he heard it, faint at first, almost unnoticeable, a soft, rhythmic sound, like footsteps hitting a moving surface over and over again. Alex froze, listening carefully. The sound was coming from somewhere inside his apartment. Slow and steady, like someone running in place, his heart started pounding. He stood up slowly and walked toward the door, the sound becoming clearer with each step. Thump, 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 just like a treadmill. Alex reached the hallway and stopped, staring into the darkness. The sound was coming from the other side. Near the living room, he didn't want to move, every instinct telling him to stay where he was, but something forced him forward, step by step, until he reached the edge of the hallway and looked into the living room. And what he saw made his blood run cold. The darkness, barely visible, was a shape moving back and forth in the same spot, running endlessly, its form flickering in and out of view, like it wasn't fully there. Alex stepped back in horror, his breathing uneven, and then the shape suddenly stopped, the silence hitting him like a wave, and slowly, very slowly, the figure turned toward him, its face still hidden in shadow, but its presence unmistakable. Alex wanted to run, to scream, but his body wouldn't move. He stood frozen as the Figure took a step forward, and then another, its movements slow but unnatural, like it wasn't used to walking. As it came closer, the shadows around it shifted, revealing more of its form, long limbs, slightly bent in wrong angles. And then its face came into view, pale, stretched, with black, empty eyes and a wide, unnatural smile. Alex stumbled back, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. And then the figure spoke, its voice low, breathless as if it had been running for a very long time. "Don't stop." Running, the words echoed in the room, sending a chill through Alex's entire body. He turned and ran back to his bedroom, slamming the door shut and locking it. His hands shaking uncontrollably, he backed away until he hit the wall, listening as the sound of footsteps returned, louder now, faster, right outside his door. Thump, 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 like someone running just inches away. The handle began to shake violently, the door rattling under the force. Alex covered his ears, trying to block it out, but the sound only grew louder, and then suddenly, everything stopped. Complete silence filled the apartment. Alex slowly lowered his hands, his breathing heavy, and for a moment he thought it was over, until he heard a new sound, coming from behind him. Inside the room, a slow, steady thump. Alex's eyes widened. He turned around slowly, and there, in the corner of his bedroom, was the figure, standing perfectly still, watching him, its black eyes locked onto his, its smile wider than before. And then, without moving its lips, the voice came again, louder this time, clearer. "You stopped." And in that moment, Alex felt something grab his legs from below, pulling him backward toward the darkness. And as he screamed, the last thing he saw was the figure stepping onto an invisible treadmill, beginning to run again, as if it had finally found someone to replace it.